My daughter's false accusation sent me to prison for 15 long years. That was the moment I ceased to regard her as my own. Before everything crumbled, my life had been relatively tranquil, almost routine. As a civil engineer, I held a stable job that allowed me to live comfortably. Each day, upon waking, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for my united family. My wife had always been the pillar of my life. Despite the inevitable ups and downs of marriage, the 20 years we'd spent together were marked by respect and love. We also had Natalia, our teenage daughter. Though she was in that challenging stage of adolescence, she had always been our pride. At least, that was what I thought before everything changed. The last week before the disaster was one of the strangest. On the surface, everything seemed normal, but there was an intangible tension in the air. I vividly remember the last time the three of us sat at the dinner table. It was an ordinary meal, nothing special, yet there was an indescribable undercurrent. Natalia was engrossed in her phone, sending messages with her head bowed, paying no heed to us. Monica, on the other hand, was trying her best to keep the conversation going, wearing that forced smile she sometimes had when something was amiss. "Natalia, how was school today?" I asked, attempting to break the ice. "Normal, Dad. Nothing interesting," she replied without looking up, her voice laced with the typical teenage weariness. Monica gave her a look only a mother could convey, suggesting her growing exasperation with her daughter's lack of engagement. "You should talk more with your father. He makes an effort to be present," Monica told her, her voice soft yet firm. "Oh, Mom, you always do this. Why don't you leave me alone?" Natalia grumbled, abruptly getting up from the table and disappearing into her room. We both exchanged a glance, silently trying to decipher what was going on. We knew it was a phase, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Little did we imagine that those seemingly innocent acts of rebellion were signs of something far more sinister brewing within her. That was the last dinner we shared as a united family. The day that changed everything began like any other. The morning was quiet. I woke up early, made my coffee, and started reviewing plans for a new project I was involved in. Everything seemed fine, even when Natalia entered the room. She had that characteristic sparkle in her eyes, a mix of youthful energy and rebelliousness. "Dad, I'm going out with Lucas tonight," she announced bluntly. The name Lucas sent a jolt through me. Just hearing it made me tense. Lucas was a troubled youth, the kind who always seemed to be on the brink of trouble. I had never been the type of father to impose my ideals or dictate how she should act, but I always had her best interests at heart, and I knew that boy was not good for her. It wasn't to disparage him, but he had a reputation in the city. Every week, his name was linked to some assault, property damage, or robbery. He was well known, and his reputation instilled fear in many. I remembered one instance when I was on my way to the supermarket to do the grocery shopping. Halfway there, I saw a group of people gathered around a boy lying on the ground, badly injured. Apparently, his bicycle had been stolen. It was a high-end bicycle, with tires suitable for various terrains, a highly comfortable cushion, and top-quality disc brakes. I passed by, not paying much attention at first. But the worst part was when I got home. There was my daughter, sitting close to Lucas, and they seemed very cozy. They were exchanging affectionate gestures, and it was like a scene from a movie. I interrupted them and sent my daughter inside. I then warned Lucas that I didn't want to see him near my daughter again. He just laughed and said, "Sir, it doesn't matter what you want. As long as your daughter wants me, I'll always be by her side." Then he got on his bike and rode away. I knew he was right. I wasn't afraid of him, but I was concerned. If he was capable of stealing a bike, I worried he wouldn't respect my warning. As the months passed, my daughter secretly continued to see that boy. I tried several times to talk to her, explaining how detrimental it would be to her future to get involved with someone like him. But she wouldn't listen. "No, I already told you. I don't want you to see that boy, Natalia. He's not good for you," I said firmly. She looked at me defiantly, anger flashing in her eyes. "You're a dictator. You always want to control everything," she shouted before storming out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Monica and I were left in silence, each lost in our thoughts. It wasn't the first time Natalia had behaved like this, but this time, I had a strange feeling that something more serious was happening. I couldn't get that look of hatred in her eyes out of my mind. Something was wrong, but I had no idea what. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was filled with questions and unease. I was worried about Natalia's attitude, but I never could have imagined the horror that was about to befall me. The next morning, I was awakened by a series of loud knocks on the door. My life took an irreversible turn at that moment. It was the police. They handcuffed me right in front of my wife and daughter. Natalia was crying uncontrollably, and then she pointed her finger at me, accusing me of heinous acts I had never committed. Everything I had built, everything I had loved, collapsed in an instant. Apparently, while I was sleeping, Monica, my wife, had called the police and filed a complaint against me for abusing our daughter. When I heard this, my first reaction was to laugh. I thought it was a cruel joke. But when I looked at my daughter, I saw her being comforted by my wife, and she was reassuring her that everything would be okay. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My daughter has falsely accused me of abuse, I thought. This must be a mistake. I told the police I could never do such a thing to my daughter. Natalia, tell them this is a joke. Tell them the truth. I shouted, almost in tears. My eyes were red from crying, and I was consumed by fear. But instead of telling the truth, Natalia affirmed what her mother had said. That man abused me several times, she said, her eyes cold and filled with hatred, without a hint of doubt. I never thought my daughter could do such a thing. We'd had our arguments, like any family, but to falsely accuse me of abuse was unforgivable. In the days following the accusation, my world came crashing down. Mario, my best friend since high school, didn't even bother to ask me if the accusations were true. The words he said to me were like a dagger to the heart. Edward, this is unforgivable. I can't associate with someone like you, he said coldly over the phone. Mario, you know me better than anyone. Do you really think I'm capable of something like that? I pleaded, but he just avoided my gaze through the phone line. I don't know what to think, he replied before hanging up, severing our friendship forever. The betrayals didn't stop there. Even my own family turned their backs on me. My parents, who had always supported me unconditionally, looked at me with disdain. We can't believe you did this, Eduardo. How could you? My mother said through tears. My father looked at me with a mixture of horror and disappointment. I tried to explain, to reason with them, but their minds were already made up. Natalia's words had been enough to shatter years of trust and love. No one believed me. I lost my job, and I could no longer go to the places I used to frequent. The hotel where I was staying kicked me out as if I were a criminal. My daughter's story spread, eventually reaching the local news, and I was branded a child abuser. The whole city seemed to be against me for something I never did. I tried to talk to my daughter and wife, but they just put on a show to gain sympathy. I asked my daughter several times why she had done this, and she just kept repeating that it was all my fault. I couldn't understand how I was to blame for something I didn't do. The pain of betrayal cut deep, but despite it all, I couldn't bring myself to completely hate my wife or my daughter. One day, while I was in a shelter, struggling to eat because of the turmoil in my life, I received a summons. It read, "Dear Mr. Peterson, please appear on April 17th at 1 p.m. at the detention center to begin your trial. Failure to appear will be taken as contempt of court, and you will be given a much harsher sentence. So, for your own well-being, please appear. Sincerely, Chief Judge of the Detention Center." I had always thought such things would be more formal, but it seemed they regarded me as an abuser and an idiot. A few days before the trial, I spoke with my lawyer, Mr. Miguel. Unlike many of my friends and family, he believed in my innocence. We had been through a lot together in the last 10 years, and our bond went beyond the typical lawyer-client relationship. He was like a brother to me. "I'm not going to lie to you," he began. "I want you to be honest with me. Based on that, I'll decide whether to support you or not. So, be straight with me. Did you do something you regret to Natalia?" he asked, his tone cold and his gaze piercing. I looked him in the eye. "I could never do that to my own daughter," I said firmly. His expression wavered for a moment, as if he had doubted me, but then he replied, "Okay, I believe you." I was so relieved, and his sudden laughter caught me off guard. When I asked him what he was laughing at, he said, "Your face, boy. You should see it." We then had a long discussion, going over all the potential challenges we faced and how we could present our case. We had evidence, and we were determined to win. When the day of the trial arrived, we saw Monica and Natalia. They were putting on a performance worthy of Hollywood. Dressed in black, their faces veiled, they were crying dramatically. It was a spectacle. For a moment, I considered approaching them, but my lawyer advised me against it, and I listened. We went to the courtroom while they continued to attract the attention of the cameras and the public. The trial was a farce from the start. My daughter's accusation was so forceful, and her performance before the judge so convincing, that the prosecutor barely needed any other evidence. My lawyer, despite his years of experience, fought hard to present the truth, but it seemed hopeless. "Miss Natalia, could you detail the events that led to your complaint?" my lawyer asked patiently. She sobbed theatrically, wiping away her tears before answering. "He would come into my room every night and do horrible things to me. He would torture me, and if I didn't let him do what he wanted, he would threaten to hurt my mom," she said. As I listened to her lies, I felt a deep sadness and disappointment. Every word was like a punch in the gut. "Do you have any physical evidence to support these accusations?" my lawyer persisted. "No, but I know what happened, and I can't keep quiet anymore," she replied firmly. The judge looked at me with intense anger. "Is what she's saying true?" he demanded. "No, sir," I replied firmly but calmly. "Then why is your daughter saying these things? Is she lying?" I was at a loss for words. Seeing my silence, some of the people in the courtroom started shouting, "Damn rapist! You should die in prison." I was shocked and tried to defend myself, but the judge banged his gavel and called for order. "Scum like you should rot behind bars," he said angrily. My lawyer tried to object, but it was no use. The trial continued, and the judge seemed to have already made up his mind. "Well, tell me your evidence, although I don't think it will change much." "Children never lie," he said dismissively. "Your Honor," I began. "Unlike you, who are judging me without evidence. Shut up and get to the point, or I'll sentence you right now," the judge interrupted. I took a deep breath and continued. "I have not done anything wrong to my daughter. I have only loved, protected, and cared for her. I don't understand where these false accusations are coming from." But my words were drowned out by Natalia's screams, insisting that I was lying. The judge, influenced by the emotional atmosphere and my daughter's lies, ignored the lack of evidence. "Return to your seat, sir," he said coldly. And then, he pronounced his verdict. "Seeing the evidence presented in this session, I find you guilty of the charges of abuse, assault, and subjugation against a minor. You are sentenced to 15 years in New York State Prison. This case is closed." I felt a sense of hopelessness as I heard those words. Natalia was laughing, and I saw Monica congratulate her. I felt a deep, seated resentment and hatred growing inside me. I never thought I would feel such emotions towards my wife and daughter. As the police led me away, I shouted, "I swear you will regret what you did to me. I'm innocent, and you know it. You're demons." A policeman then hit me with a baton, knocking me unconscious. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. For a moment, I hoped it had all been a nightmare, but then the nurse addressed me. "How are you doing, recruit number 236-79927, she asked. I was filled with panic. "Fine," I replied numbly. "Excellent. Rest a little longer, and then they'll take you to your cell," she said. I couldn't believe it. I asked her what had happened, and she told me that my daughter had withdrawn the lawsuit. "You have a wonderful daughter," she said with a laugh. But I knew my daughter was far from wonderful. She was a capricious girl who, when she didn't get her way, would go to extreme lengths to make others pay. I spent the next 5 years in prison, and during that time, I came to understand what had really happened. It was all because I had tried to keep her away from Lucas. But finally, the day of my release arrived. I collected my few belongings and walked out of the prison gates. There, waiting for me, were Monica and Natalia. They both looked repentant, with tears in their eyes. Natalia tried to hug me, but I pushed her away forcefully. "Why the show? I don't understand what you're trying to do, but I'm not falling for your games," I said coldly. They looked at each other, confused, as if they had expected a different reaction. "You thought that after getting me out of prison, after falsely accusing me, I would forgive you and everything would be okay? You must be crazy," I said, looking them in the eye. Natalia fell to her knees, crying and begging for my forgiveness. "Dad, please forgive me. It was all a mistake, a stupid mistake of a capricious girl." "Mistake? I spent 5 years in prison because of your stupidity. They did horrible things to me in there. And you think a simple apology will make it all go away? Don't be ridiculous," I shouted. Monica looked at me in surprise. I was also surprised at my own outburst. For the past 10 years, I had been the calm and loving father, the perfect husband, but that false accusation had changed me. The hatred in my heart couldn't be easily erased. I left them there, ignoring their pleas for forgiveness. The first few days after my release were extremely difficult. My reputation was in ruins, and I couldn't find a job. But eventually, I found work on a farm on the outskirts of the city. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. My job was to feed the animals and take care of any repairs or maintenance. Although it was far from my profession as an engineer, it was something. Over time, the owners of the farm took a liking to me. I felt a sense of acceptance there that I had never felt in my own family. It was strange, but I finally felt understood and not judged. I even started a relationship with their daughter, Anna. Anna was amazing. She took care of me like no one else ever had. At first, I was hesitant to tell her about my past, but I knew that if I wanted our relationship to work, I had to be honest. When I told her the truth, I was prepared for her to judge me, but instead, she believed me. That made me happier than I could ever express. I finally felt cared for and protected. Before I started working at the farm, I had talked to Anna's parents. I thanked them for the opportunity and then decided to be completely honest with them about my past. I was falsely accused of abuse by my own daughter and wife, I said. There was a long silence, and I braced myself for rejection. But then Mr. Vayu asked, "Is that true?" "No, sir. It was all a lie because I didn't want my daughter to see a boy who was a bad influence on her," I replied. To my surprise, they said, "We believe you. You seem like a good man, not the type to do such things." I was so overcome with emotion that I cried. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had found a real family. But just when my life seemed to be getting back on track, I received another summons from the court. It was from Monica and Natalia. They were suing me for child support for the years I had spent in prison and couldn't take care of Natalia. I was furious. This has to be a joke. What evil women, I shouted. But this time, I was determined not to let them win. I talked to Anna and her parents, and they agreed to help me. I was so grateful to have them by my side. When the day of the trial arrived, Monica looked happy and glamorous, dressed in a black dress and high heels, like a soap opera actress. Natalia, on the other hand, seemed more disheveled. She wore a plain blue sweatshirt and simple pants, and her face was etched with sadness, perhaps a reflection of the pain she had caused me during my time in prison. I didn't dwell on it too much. I simply took my seat and waited for the judge to arrive. This time, I was determined that things would be different. I had requested a change of judge, pointing out the unfairness of the previous trial where the judge had blindly believed a child's unfounded accusations. I knew that children could be manipulative, and I was not going to let the same mistake happen again. An experienced and renowned judge was now presiding over our case, and I felt a glimmer of hope. The trial began, and Monica's lawyers argued that I should pay child support, claiming that I had failed to fulfill my parental duties while in prison. Their reasoning was absurd, considering I was imprisoned for a crime I didn't commit. My lawyers countered forcefully, stating, "Your Honor, how can they expect my client to pay for something when he was wrongfully imprisoned? It's completely illogical." Monica's lawyers exchanged nervous glances, clearly caught off guard by our strong argument. Throughout the heated discussion, I couldn't help but notice Natalia's demeanor. She seemed increasingly uncomfortable, and then, suddenly, she shouted, "Enough! I'm tired of this. I don't want to continue." The courtroom fell silent, and everyone waited with bated breath for her next words. Monica tried to shush her, but Natalia ignored her and continued, "I just want my father's forgiveness. I don't need the money. I don't want anything else. Please, Dad, forgive me." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes, and for a moment, my heart wavered. But the memories of the 5 years of suffering in prison came flooding back, and I hardened my resolve. I looked at her coldly and said, "I'm very sorry, Natalia, but I can't. You have no idea how much I suffered in prison. You ruined my life on a whim, and a simple apology can't fix that." The judge intervened, saying, "Mr. Peterson, I understand that hatred may linger in your heart, but reconciliation can bring great joy." I interrupted him. "Your Honor, I appreciate your perspective, but I'm not ready for that right now. Please respect my decision." The judge sighed and then said, "Although I can't force Mr. Peterson to forgive you, Natalia, I can still uphold the law regarding child support. Mr. Peterson, as her father, you are obligated to pay 35% of your monthly salary for the past 5 years." I glared at the judge with hatred but remained silent. If paying this money meant getting rid of them, I was willing to do it. I then added, "Your Honor, I also request a restraining order." The courtroom gasped in surprise, but I was firm in my decision. The judge granted me a 20-meter restraining order for 6 months, on the condition that I seek psychological counseling to deal with my emotional wounds. As the weeks passed, my life slowly got back on track. With Anna by my side, I was gradually regaining my confidence and building a new life. My job on the farm was fulfilling, and I felt a sense of peace and tranquility that I hadn't experienced in years. I finally felt that all the suffering I had endured was worth it, and life was starting to smile on me again. However, just when I thought I had finally left my past behind, Anna brought me a letter. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with worry. "Peter, look what they sent you from the detention center," she said, her voice trembling. I was confused. "What is this about?" I asked. She took a deep breath and said, "They're suing you for the 3rd time, and this time it's serious. If you're found guilty, you could face the maximum penalty or even life imprisonment." The news hit me like a ton of bricks. A chill ran down my spine, and I was speechless for a moment. I thought that after the last trial, everything was over. They had gotten their money, and I had my freedom. But it seemed they were determined to destroy me completely. Anger welled up inside me, and I decided that if they wanted a fight, I would give them one. I discussed the situation with Anna's parents, and they recommended a top-notch lawyer named Mr. Bellini. He had an impressive reputation for winning every case he took on, known for his cold, calculating demeanor and his ability to make opponents cower. When I met with him, I laid out the entire story of what had happened to me, both before and after my imprisonment. His cold and calculating personality made me nervous. I wasn't sure if he would believe me or simply dismiss me. After I finished speaking, I looked at him hopefully and asked, "Would you be willing to take my case, Mr. Bellini?" He looked at me intently for a moment and then said, "Do you think I would have agreed to meet with you if I wasn't interested?" This was a request from my old friend Heli, Anna's father. "He spoke highly of you, so I'm willing to give you a chance." Relieved, I got straight to the point. "Mr. Bellini, I want you to help me destroy my ex-wife and my daughter. I can't stand the thought of them anymore. I want them to pay for what they've done to me." He looked at me sternly and said, "Are you sure this is what you want? Once we start this, there's no turning back. I can handle your ex-wife easily, but your daughter, she's still your flesh and blood. Are you really prepared to see her suffer?" I hesitated for a moment, thinking about all the pain Natalia had caused me. The memories of the prison, the betrayals, and the ruined life came rushing back. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want her to feel even a fraction of the pain I endured because of her." Mr. Bellini nodded and said, "Well, then, we have work to do. The plan is simple. We expose their lies and prove your innocence once and for all." We spent hours going over the details of my relationship with Monica and Natalia, looking for any information that could be used to our advantage. At first, most of what I told him seemed irrelevant, but then I mentioned Lucas, and his eyes lit up. He realized that Lucas was the key to unraveling the whole conspiracy. When the day of the trial finally arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. Anna and her family accompanied me, offering their unwavering support. As we approached the courthouse, we saw a large crowd gathered outside. There were reporters and onlookers, all eager to see the spectacle. Monica was being interviewed, looking smug and happy in the spotlight. Natalia stood beside her, looking downcast, but I didn't let her appearance fool me. The reporters immediately surrounded me, bombarding me with accusatory questions. "How could you do such a thing to your own daughter? You're a monster," they shouted. But then, a brave woman in the crowd spoke up. "Wait, let him speak. Everyone deserves a chance to defend themselves." Her words gave me a glimmer of hope, and I took a deep breath and began to tell the truth about what had really happened. Monica, of course, tried to undermine me. "It's all a lie. He's a dangerous man who threatened us for years. Don't believe him," she cried, putting on her usual dramatic act. But I didn't let her get to me. I turned to the crowd and shouted, "When this trial is over, the truth will come out, and all of you who doubted me will regret it." Inside the courtroom, the battle was fierce. Both sides presented strong arguments, but Monica and her lawyers had an arsenal of false evidence. However, Mr. Bellini was prepared. He methodically picked apart their lies, revealing that the previous judge had been an accomplice in the miscarriage of justice. Monica's face turned pale as her web of lies began to unravel. "Miss Monica," Mr. Bellini said, "could you please describe in detail how my client tortured you? Please be as convincing as possible, since that's what you're good at." Monica stammered, clearly caught off guard. He would grab me by the neck at night and hit me. He threatened me, and I was too scared to say anything," she lied. My lawyer interrupted. "But if that's true, why didn't you file a lawsuit sooner? Why wait until now?" Monica stumbled over her words. "Because he threatened me. He said no one would believe me." Mr. Bellini then dropped the bombshell. "Your Honor, we have evidence that the judge in the previous trial was bribed to convict my client. And we also have reason to believe that Miss Monica and her daughter fabricated the entire story with the help of a certain Lucas, who has a long history of criminal behavior." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Monica's lawyers tried to object, but the judge silenced them. The judge then turned to me and said, "Mr. Peterson, I want to hear your side of the story." I stood up and looked the judge in the eye. "Your Honor, these two women have caused me immeasurable pain. In prison, I was physically and mentally abused. I lost everything: my family, my friends, my career, all because of their lies. I'm asking for justice. I want them to pay for what they've done." As I spoke, my family members in the courtroom started shouting at me, calling me ungrateful. But I didn't care. I had had enough of their blind faith in my accusers. The judge banged his gavel and called for order. After hearing all the evidence, the judge finally made his decision. "I find Mr. Peterson innocent of all charges. And as for Miss Monica and Natalia, you will be punished for the crime of false accusation, defamation of character, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Monica, you will serve a long prison sentence, and Natalia, since you are still a minor, you will be sent to a juvenile detention center until you reach the age of majority, at which point you will be transferred to an adult prison." I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders as I heard the verdict. I looked at Monica and Natalia. They were both in tears, looking at me with a mixture of fear and regret. Natalia broke free from the guards and ran towards me. "Dad, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I don't want to go to prison," she pleaded. I looked at her, my heart a mixture of emotions. Despite everything she had done, she was still my daughter. But I couldn't forget the pain she had caused. "I can't forgive you right now, Natalia. Maybe one day, but not today," I said, turning away. Over time, I was able to build a new life. I married Anna, and we had two beautiful children, Emily and Jose. I started my own construction business, and with the support of my new family, I finally achieved my dreams. My old family tried several times to reach out to me, but I refused to have anything to do with them. I didn't want their toxicity in my life anymore. As for Monica and Natalia, I heard through the grapevine that their sentences had been reduced due to good behavior, but they were still struggling in prison. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but I reminded myself of the years of suffering they had inflicted on me. Everyone has to face the consequences of their actions, and they had certainly faced theirs. I was finally free, and I was determined to cherish the life I had built with the people who truly loved and believed in me.